Well, good afternoon, everybody. We are lighting the candle, A World That Works, and I am Bill Carell. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here today. This is an extraordinary day for me. I'll get into that a little bit more later. But first of all, I've looked forward to being semi well as compared to the last podcast that you may or may not have listened to yet with COVID. So you can't tell me that I let COVID get in the way of my responsibilities as far as this podcast is concerned. So, having said that, don't tell me you don't have time to listen. We want you to get the most out of this and to really enjoy your lives. So I am here, and they're tolerating my opening at this moment because they love me. And quite frankly, I'm really excited to be here with all three of you. We've got Lisa and Ken and Jan. And I'm wondering if we can bat around the metaphors of the circle. As we all know, in literature and song, there's a repetition of how the circle is either the guide for our lives, how it um, tends to bring things around a second and a third time. Just, the whole notion that life exists either inside of or because of a circle. Now, that's not necessarily true, but I'm setting it up this way just to see where our conversation can go. We've had some remarkable conversations in the past having to do with the metaphor of the circle, and I'll just let it go from there. So, in order of the way people showed up this morning, Lisa, would you like to say hello? And then Ken, and then Jan, you can back cleanup, okay?
You want me to say more than hello?
I think you've got the floor, and whatever you want to expound upon, that will be beautiful for us.
Well, I always like to go with what hits me first, um, after your statements. And well, of course, there are circles throughout life, but I tend to go more with the spiral, and only because it helps me think about life better. Because it made me understand by doing a spiral, like as you're going up, you can still see things that were going on before, but from a different vantage point. And that's why they come back around again. At least that was a nice way for me to understand how life can keep going back at, the same things can keep hitting you, even though you thought you resolved them or that kind of thing. But you're always kind of hopefully going up.
I like it. The whole Taoist helix. It's something you can lose yourself in, in terms of reading about it and kind of expressing it. I mean, really, forever. You can never know it. You know what I mean? So, Mr. Ken.
So I totally agree with the whole spiral thing. Yeah, actually, that's my latest project is the Life Spiral project because it's exactly that. And so our viewers won't be able to see this, but you guys are all familiar with the Zen circle, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I was taught to look at this not in two dimensions, but in three. So, and if you look at it, because the whole idea is, it's like this one brushstroke to create this. But if you look at it as if you're looking down on it, and you look at like kind of the end of the circle where it kind of tapers to a point,
Hmm.
follow it up. It's like it's rising into being. It's coming from what was below and it's coming up towards you. And that just really struck me as a very powerful kind of way of thinking about, you know, how a circle can often in our lives we end up in kind of circular thinking or circular patterns, or we keep repeating circular relationships, or we have the opposite where that circle goes downwards, and we have kind of a descent because of difficulties and challenges or whatever. So the question becomes exactly what Lisa was saying. How do we use the cycles, the circular cycles of life, and leverage that in a way where we spiral up? So if you were looking down on your life, there's actually elevation and evolution occurring, in the trajectory instead of just spinning in place, or there will always be some of that, and there will always be spiraling down, but in general, how can we create a sense of an upward spiral in our lives? So
Excellent. Miss Jan? We do not have a microphone for you. That's
Okay.
more better.
there
Yeah,
we go.
that's better. I was reminded of a chapter in my favorite book, which is called Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser. And in it, she quotes a quote by Mother Teresa, which is, the problem with the world is that we draw the circle of our family too small. And in the chapter, she goes on to tell a personal story about something, and about how all of a sudden she realized she had to draw, we make the boundaries of our family. And I think I've always looked at my friends as my family in a lot of ways, because of some personal situations, and that, what would happen in the world if we actually thought of everybody as our family, or we drew that whole idea of family, if we expanded that out. So that was what came to my mind.
Very interesting.
It's a great way to potentially begin the process of dissolving tribalism,
or expanding it. So the notion of inclusion starts off with a presupposition that not everyone's included. And what if they are? What if the conversation is just on the wrong track? Interesting thing to look at, because if you look at family, community, the world, and I always love that generic term, the family of man, which means you don't have to know how many there are, because every minute one's leaving and one's coming on board. I mean, almost every second, actually, or maybe even many times a second. So the whole notion of a circular metaphor, I've loved all of the. I'll start in the 50s and 60s with singer songwriters using the notion of a merry-go-round, or Joni Mitchell's Circle Game, and the whole notion of painted ponies going up and down, which is not necessarily a specific circle within one plane. But if you think about the Earth, we all think that the Earth goes around in a circle because the sun is right where it is. It's hanging on a big string, and then the Earth is on a string that just kind of cycles around it. But the cool thing is it never makes a circle. It makes a helix. The sun is moving this way, through the universe, and the Earth never goes back to the exact same spot that it's ever been in before, ever. I know that to be true, 100%. So the point is, the whole idea of having a circle, is that something that people can use as an empowerment tool, the notion of a circle? Like, for instance, remember gathering the wagons in a circle back in the prairie days? That was how, before they went to bed every night, that they made sure that, wild animals, or, people that were unfriendly to them didn't come in and either make off with some food, or make off with somebody, or come in and attack them. And the other thing, the Harry Chapin, All My Life is a Circle. So if you use that as kind of a way to relate, it's a coin of the realm in terms of giving us some sense of the fact that we consider time not to be everywhere all at once. Our culture typically considers time to be something that moves in a linear fashion, through space. And it essentially, again, we never can dip our toe into the same river twice, because time does not stand still. So, as a tool of empowerment, the whole notion of the circle, the helix, the spiral, where does that become powerful to human beings in terms of relating to their family and their community? Because I really like that part of what we're talking about.
First, I have to laugh because the circle game is my class song, and we just had our reunion. So you get men and women gathering, holding hands in a circle, singing
Anybody,
that song out loud.
anybody
Very
cry? That's a
I
laugh or
did,
cry kind of a song for many people.
and I just did a workshop on, I guess it was a week ago Sunday, talking about the cycle of creation, and she actually talked about that song. So it came up for me just like, a week and a half ago. So
We're
It's
probably singing it at the same time.
it's amazing how something that is it's a notion. I mean, the whole idea of the circle isn't something that's necessarily visible, and it's something that we can immediately identify with and go, yeah, I get it. That's it.
And I was thinking too how just gathering, it's so much better when you're in circle. I mean, we've done that in multiple places. I mean, it comes down to the simple fact of even, at a banquet, it's much easier to put people around table than one big long table. But we've done it, sure, wherever two or more are gathered, if you can go in circle and see each other's faces and just be in that circular energy. I mean, it's used so much and to great benefit, I think.
I've taught classes where for a while I was teaching a chair mobility class called Ageless Grace, and we always did it in a circle. And it wasn't, like musical. Well, it could have been musical chairs, and the fact that we did play music, but the whole idea of seeing everyone, knowing everybody is seeing everyone's face versus seeing the backs of people.
Sure. King Arthur's Round Table. And I don't know if you remember this. I paid particular attention to it back in the early 1970s because I was quite interested in possibly being drafted when they were constructing the peace talks for Vietnam. Of course, the peace talks were never successful, but when they were constructing the peace talks, there was like a 6-month argument over what shape the table should be in order for the U.S. not to be at the head of the table and be running everything. And they ultimately, basically said, we will have a round table or we will not come to the table at all. And that also meant that everybody was an equal at the table and that they all had an equal opportunity to provide something towards a peaceful solution. I like that. And, it's like when we talk about people who get together to solve problems, we have these things called study circles. We have these things called, back in the day, empowerment circles were a very big thing in manufacturing. And we literally did stand around in a circle, and there were no bad ideas, only ideas. And the ones that seemed to have legs were the ones that would get followed up on and tried out. And when they either worked or didn't work, we get back together in our empowerment circle and discuss what happened and get everybody's point of view on what happened so that it didn't just automatically become a change in procedure.
I'm wondering what was brought to mind as we were talking about the circle was just I brought up musical chairs, like teaching in a circle versus teaching in a classroom style. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the time when, like, my mother was a kindergarten teacher, and at that time everybody sat at tables, and they were all round tables. And just in the development for kids or even adults, like, how would things change if everybody could see each other at the table?
Sure.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting about whenever I would do outreach, if the numbers weren't prohibitive, we would do a circle. So, whether I was working with teenagers, adults, or 4-year-olds. And the other thing that I always liked about that was you were able to position yourself as just a guide who was sharing in the journey and had just acquired a little bit of experiential wisdom that you know gave you the position of speaking, but it wasn't like this. You were part of it. So when you're standing in front facing everyone and they're all facing you, it's a different power dynamic. And I always valued the circle. We would do it like teacher training, and I didn't care if we had 40 people. We put them all in the big circle. Sometimes the shapes are a little challenging in and of themselves because it's harder to maximize a smaller space when you're in circles. You do little circles, but wherever possible, it's interesting how it shifts, I think, energetically the experience, especially of learning, when you're able to utilize a circle or something circle like.
Well, sometimes to establish the circle, you hold hands, and everyone goes as far apart as they can holding hands, and then they all drop their hands to their side, and this is where we conduct business from. And it's a wonderful kind of a way to start things with people touching each other in in an accepting, non-judgmental way. And I think about some of the things that we've always looked at our entire lives. For instance, the schoolhouse clock. It used to be a regulator. The regulators came out of, they were timepieces that kept the railroads running on time. In each one of the places where the train stopped, there was somebody who had the key who kept the regulator wound, and they always got an update of what the time was at the last stop, so that if they needed to adjust the time a little bit ahead or a little bit back, so there was the circle of the face of the dial. And it's just kind of interesting to me how that became kind of the norm. If you look back at, I actually had a pretty extensive collection of clocks in my 30s and 40s. Everything from Seth Thomas, to actually, to you name it, a lot of different clocks. And what was unique about all of them was that they all looked different from each other, except for the face of the clock. They were all circular, and they all had 12 marks on them, or 12 numbers. And even if they were a foreign language on the dial. So these whole, there's something comforting, I guess, about the notion of having certain things be familiar and be circles.
And be complete. That's the other, because one of the things I have been part of is the Circle of Trust by Parker Palmer. So, and those are, you're definitely in the circle, but it's a safe circle where as he says, the shy soul can come out, because there's touchstones that you have to participate, that you have to agree to, mostly like no advising, no saving, no that kind of thing. But and that strict confidentiality in those two. And then I was also thinking, like, the families that share a meal together are usually much stronger, and that's around a table. So got lots of circles of community in different ways.
And the interesting part, yeah, go ahead.
And I was thinking of, having held healing circles.
Or prayer circles.
Or prayer circles, yeah.
Mhm.
Healing circles, prayer circles. I've done Reiki circles or Reiki shares, and that's always done in a circle.
So the other interesting thing, Ken, when we think about our friend Mr. Campbell and the hero's journey, it is like the foundational premise of life being a helix, in my personal opinion. And although there have been lots of takeoffs on the hero's journey, it's almost never represented, and I've never seen the hero's journey represented in a linear fashion, only in a circle. Because it starts out, and there's like the four points on a clock. There's something very ordinary going on, and our hero is very lackluster and lacks any talent or even any direction in his life. And then the next thing that comes is some kind of a breakdown or a call to action directly after that. And then once that happens, there's a choice on the part of the hero to rise to the challenge, even though he or she knows that they are no match for it. And then it takes them to this place where people use different language. Sometimes they talk about it being your innermost cave, but that place that is unknown to you, but usually full of fear. And other people call it going through the eye of the needle. That metaphor of making yourself, changing your shape so that you actually can go through the eye of a needle it's a great koan for being open to anything and fearing nothing while you're fearing everything. All of those things at the same time. So then there's the sword. There's always a sword. Sometimes it comes out of the stone easily. Sometimes the sword is thrust into our hero's hand, against their better judgment or accepting. And then the next thing you know, they get pretty good at the sword. Now, in some versions of the hero's journey, they get good at the sword and they become pretty much the best in the world, except for in some versions that hero dies and must be reborn. In other ones, they just get the prize. They might just get the bottle of elixir of life, which brings them full circle again back to where the world is stable and balanced, and there's no need for their superpowers any longer. They can just be a normal mortal until the next call to action. Now, Ken, you've done some particularly wonderful things with that. I ran through that, and there are many different interpretations, but I absolutely love what you've done in terms of making that into a strategy for people, to make up ways to live their lives.
Yeah, and it's and it's interesting because we linked the momentum learning system, and the momentum teaching system to the hero's journey. And, to me, one of the most interesting things about it is when you complete that circle, it really is a spiral because there's the return to the ordinary world, but you've been changed by your experiences in the extraordinary world and the challenges you faced and everything. So now you're moving forwards with a foot in each world, so you're bringing this value with you forwards. And it's so funny. This is such a relevant conversation to so much of the work we've done, because even when we work with teachers, we talk about learning loops and the idea of creating a closed system of experiential information so that you have something that you can recall. So for the student, if you leave it just kind of open-ended and there isn't some way for them to reflect back on that chunk of learning, it can get a little bit fuzzy, and it's not very actionable. So so we have a learning loop, but then at the end of it, we're always very clear that one of the things you need to do is at the end of the loop, you need to point them forwards. And the pointing forward is basically so you can stack these loops and turn them into the spiral. So they're like circles that also are spirals at the same time, and a lot of that came from really thinking about the hero's journey, and how powerful of a metaphor that can be in the symbols. Another fun example was when we do a birthday party.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw them. They're just all customized, and and it was really, the whole idea was, let's make this child the hero of their own story. And we were so committed to it that at the beginning of the party, we'd stand them on a chair and put a cape around them. We literally put them in a cape. They were in their own extraordinary world that was of their own design, so they'd have this experience. And it was always kind of cool watching. I liked watching their connection to their family and friends, to that circle on the other side of that 2-hour experience. Kids are patting them on the back, they're thanking them. They've got this kind of glow to them. They've been changed, because it was the design of it was meaningful. So I guess that's the other thing is, when you think of the circles in your life, whether they're, a contained thing or a path you're following or something you're using like a flywheel to gain momentum, how conscious are you of the design? Because the purer the circle, the more powerful it is. Especially if you're thinking like a wheel. You drive your car on an oval, it doesn't work quite the same as you know if it's circular. So yeah.
I'm thinking that
Yeah,
maybe
there's something about.
Go ahead, Bill.
I love how we're both thinking and expressing at the same time, Jan. And the reason I love that is because every time I say, "And what have you got, Jan?" you always wow me. So
Oh, I was going to
what have
say,
you got, Jan?
I was just going to say maybe I should have had like contacted Ken for my last birthday.
I know.
We did some adult parties and they were awesome.
I had a big birthday, so I could have used that, like, being a superhero would have been very applicable.
Yeah, well, and it
trying
was
to
interesting because
Yeah.
oh, I was going to say, Bill, what was interesting, and I think, and we ended up doing, I mean, our focus was mainly on children, but we had several adults that wanted to do it, and their reason was it was this way for them to celebrate the relationships that they had with other people that had meaning in their life. So, and it was fun because by plugging it into the hero's journey, they got to kind of be, I don't know, they were a part of that celebration, but they were also like swimming through these waters of kind of, being paid value to, and people were there for them. And they, so it was just this cool dynamic. So we didn't do a lot of adult ones, but the ones we did were always a lot of fun. And they were, it was like everybody had permission. You're in Quester's Way. It's full of just childlike wonder. So all the adults like walked through the door and they instantly had permission to act like overgrown kids. So so that was really cool too, you know.
I'm thinking I really should have done it, but
You
In
know
the
what?
future.
Yes. There's no way to have done it. There's only to do it. And as a
Right.
matter of fact, we can get together at Texas de Brazil and we can stand you on a chair and put a cape on you anytime you like.
Oh, thank you.
And I will know what your colors are because I'll go back and re-listen to your 100-person project.
Oh, I know what my colors are. Yeah.
Seems like they were gold and I want to say probably purple.
It was purple and orange. Yeah. Purple and
Yeah.
yeah.
Don't ask me where I pulled that from, but the point
Somewhere
is
in Banks.
it's there somewhere. But I mean, the remarkable thing about it too is that you can take the framework of the hero's journey and do really cool things in terms of like creating a learning loop. And the two really key pieces of the learning loop that I took away from my time with you, Ken, was number one is to take that time out at the end to both not only recover yourself, and rest up and look back thoughtfully so that you come away with a solid takeaway, something that you've actually learned that will now inform the next time that you go back to work on either that problem or a bigger one. And that's that whole notion of coming back to the place that you began from with a better question. And that all of life is not about seeking answers. It's more about having the opportunity to have your eyes open to where the next best question comes from. And it's not always the first thing that we think of. And in many cases, it's not the second or the third thing. But it's worth dwelling on for a while, and it's worth allowing yourself to be completely recovered, reload everything that you need to, pack a big lunch for the next time to go out and do battle, and just have some fun with it. So where else in our culture, and you want to talk about songs for a minute, I just love every single song that has this whole circle notion in it. And the world we believe is round. It's round. It's roundish, right? I guess it's actually oblong, especially at the equator, because we're spinning at such a rate of speed, and there's a lot of outward tension. That people say that it's an artificial uh, that that where sea level is and where the land is artificially high as a result of that. And again, we talk about, just in our everyday language, about circling back. Some of us say it more than others. But the whole idea is that you're never moving away from something as much as you're moving back around towards it again. And the Carly Simon song, "We'll Be Coming Around Again." If you're willing to learn, if you're willing to play the game. And so there's the gameness of the circle, and there's also the fact that the circle is a teaching circle from an experience standpoint, and it just completely allows you the choice to continue coming back and doing it again and again.
The other interesting thing, and this is another kind of, it's a learning thing, but I think it can apply to a lot of things. The going around the circle again is not a bad thing, because the spiral will be embedded within it. So, like, for example, one of the learning processes we use is called AIM, and it's AIM. And we started using it originally with compound body movement fitness routines, but then we applied it to a whole bunch of things. And the idea was you circle through the same information 3 times over like 3 weeks. And A was for acclimate. You're just open to understanding it. So you think like you're running on a trail, and you do your first lap, and you're just figuring out, how far up am I going to go? Where are the big rocks? Is there a stream? You're getting the lay of the terrain. You're not worried about, your performance. You're worried about learning, but then the second time you intensify. The I is now you can go a little harder. You can push a little bit because you have a level of familiarity. And then the third time through is maximize. Now you know what you're doing, and you can really squeeze the benefit. So, it'd be interesting, like with martial arts, with kids especially, you teach them a movement, and they're like, okay, I know that. Show me another new thing. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You learned it, but now let's circle back through this 2 more times so that we can intensify our understanding of it, and then maximize the benefit. Then we can add more newness to it. But sometimes I feel like once we've completed a circle, we forget the value in circling back, like you're saying, to kind of squeeze the juice out of it, whatever the experience is. So
In yoga, we talk a lot about, or at least I talk a lot about in my class, is that when you come into something for the second time, it's never the same, because you're different than
yep.
because you're different than you were a minute ago. So doing the same poses over and over again from like in an hour sequence of varying the sequence, but when you come back to the same pose, you're totally anew.
That reminds me of you ever hear the story of Einstein giving a test to his students, and a student noticing that the questions were the same on the test every year. And he said to him, the questions are the same every year. I mean, isn't that getting kind of predictable? And he said, yeah, the questions are the same, but the answers keep changing.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's cool.
That's very good.
Yeah.
But when we were talking about a circle, I was thinking about I mean, if you look at just physiologically, everything is a circle. I mean, in a
Mm.
way, or a circuit, we could say, like your circulatory system is a circuit. Your breath is really a cycle or a circle. And it just, it's something that's really inherent in our own nature, is this whole idea of a circle or a cycle or a circuit. It's all just repetition and coming back in and out.
Yeah, I definitely see that, and they all three reference each other, don't they? Seem to, like for instance, when you were talking about martial arts, I remember going to East Catholic High School over in Manchester back in the 1970s to go see a young man whose name was Superfoot. And
oh yeah, Bill Wallace. Yeah,
absolutely. So we went over for the first time, and I was actually taking Taekwondo, Muay Taekwondo, with my next door neighbor Carl Scottinello, working at Brand Rex. And so a bunch of us went over to see Bill Wallace do his demonstration. And what was really cool is there were probably 15 different black belts that were all brought there at the same time to perform katas from their individual disciplines. And the biggest distinction was there was a man there that was dressed in silks instead of a cotton gi, and with dragons, and tigers, looked like hand stitched on an absolutely gorgeous uniform. And at the end of his performance, he basically said the main difference between most martial arts and kung fu is that kung fu is a circular motion with your feet, with your hands, with your blocks. Everything is in a circle. So the difference for that is most of the strikes in karate, and the lines taken are straight ahead, or side to side, but mostly linear. And he said it's kind of like, when the Brazilians decided that they were going to steal martial arts and do the capoeira and turn it into a dance. That's 100% circular. Every motion is around in a circle, the feet and the hands and the arms. But was really cool. And the thing I really wanted to tell you about Bill Wallace, I have never seen a human being put a comb between his big toe and his first toe on his right foot and then part somebody's hair with it. That was fantastic.
Yeah, he was very skilled.
Yes, he was. And he could hold that leg up in the air for minutes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And that amazed most of the other black belts, because some of them could do things like thumb push-ups or single finger push-ups and all the rest of it. And Wallace could do that with one hand. It was really quite amazing. And again, the neat part of it is he was a fighter, not as much he actually fought competitively for prize money. And he was one of the guys that probably made the most money, doing that. But the reason when you think about everything, where did they fight? They fought in a ring.
Mm-hmm.
What's the shape of a ring? It's typically, round. How about the one on our finger? That's also round. It's to kind of be emblematic of the everlasting and never-ending promise, or whatever it is for people. But the neat part of a circle is when you go to bed tonight, the circle's going to wake you up tomorrow and you get a new place to start. It can be a brand new start for you every single day if that's what you choose to do.
Yep.
I was thinking of the Mobius strip too, because that's
yes,
an interesting shape. What's inside goes outside again, and vice versa, or continual.
The Mobius loop was what the 8-track tape was based on. It has one flip in it, and it gives you twice as much recorded space as you don't have to turn it over. It just continues to play and forever. And I'm not sure what Mobius means. It probably means continuous, or something of that nature.
Good question. Let me look it up.
So I want to come back to what Jan presents. We shall not cease from exploration. At the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. And I think that was a tongue-in-cheek know the place for the first time. More like experience the place for the first time and probably never know it. The more we think we know something, it almost seems like the less we are open to learning from wherever it is we are.
Well, either that or the reverse. The more we know something, the more we realize that we don't know anything.
There's that statement too. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know a damn thing.
Yeah, or the more I question, so therefore I don't,
Yeah.
I mean, yes,
Yeah,
there
that's
are
kind of the whole
things, but
the Dunning-Kruger thing, that we're challenged with right now, and it's that ability to maintain a beginner's mind. Like the whole Dunning-Kruger thing is at the beginning, people are very comfortable saying, I don't know, but then once they start to learn about it, they quickly think the belief is that you know it, you're an expert. And that's the space where you actually don't know it. It's just new enough that, your actual knowledge is disproportionate to your perceived knowledge on that thing. So you watch the YouTube video about whatever, and you're like, now you're the expert in it. But then the real experts on the other side are very, very quick to say, I don't know, because they've accumulated and acquired enough experiential wisdom to understand how much they has yet to unfold in front of them. So it's interesting, and that's one of the things you'd see that in the martial arts a lot. You had to be very cautious that the ego didn't, boot you out of a beginner's mind where, someone challenges your belief or your practice or whatever, and for a lot of people, they immediately go into their talking points. Well, it's this because of that, or I'm right because of this, that kind of thing, as opposed to, I never thought about it that way. That's interesting. And they're open to it and they ask questions. And maybe in the end, they choose not to agree, but they're receptive to the fact that, they know there's a lot they don't know, and they're comfortable in that space. All the greatest masters that I've worked with were like that. They were actually looking forward to things that challenged their own understanding and belief, and they would jump on it. It's like, wait, go back. Tell me more about that. It actually would make you nervous because you're like, well, I don't really know. And they're like, no. There's something there. Maybe you do know. And they were going to pull it out of you because that was going to help them grow, and there's no fear of that. It's really cool.
I think coming from my science background, I mean, you look for things that you don't know, and you're always looking for deeper, because even if you do know something, there's something else.
Yeah.
The story never ends, basically. So you're always
Yeah.
looking for the beginning, or
Yep.
something or something that's before that.
Yeah.
The other interesting aspect of the Dunning-Kruger effect has to do with people's self-valuation without any other information. And especially over the last 25 years, where people have not had a competitive environment to operate in, I can tell you before 1975, if any, welcome back, Ken. I was just saying the Dunning-Kruger effect also had a lot to do with there not being physical rankings in school. For example, when I was in grammar school, all of our grades were published, in the form of a big red letter at the top of the page when they were handed back to us. So if you got an A, you got an A, and everybody in the class knew you got an A because the teacher was very careful to flash it. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, after years and years of not having any type of overt competition, was about people who just naturally believed that they were like in the top 5% of all people in any particular given area. And the neat part of it was when they actually tested people who had been trained or had expertise or would be, without doubt, at the top of their class in a particular area, they were the ones who didn't place themselves in the top 10% or the top 20%. They almost always undervalued their skill.
Mhm.
And the rest of the people, the 95%, all thought that they were 100% in the top 5%, when they might have been in the bottom 30%. But it didn't seem to make any difference to them.
Yeah, it's a very interesting and very human, kind of phenomenon.
Exactly. And it also demonstrates the value of having some sort of an objective measure as you go through life, so you actually do have some sort of an idea of where you are on the continuum, not necessarily in terms of competition with other people, but again, I always like that notion of being competition with the person you woke up as this morning, you know, that each day is going to give you more information and maybe give you an opportunity to be a better person than you were when you woke up this morning or when you went to sleep last night.
So Mobius is actually the name of the man who discovered it.
There you go.
Okay. That makes
Even
sense.
though they prove that they've shown that it existed prior to that, but he discovered it.
I like that. We don't say invented as much as we used to, do we?
No, we're still learning.
Yeah.
Go back again. Go back.
Unbelievable. I think there's just so much lack of wonder today because there's so much available on the internet. And I used to say this back in the 1990s, while I was a fledgling IT business owner coming up through that period of time. And I always said that we need to be training the thought process of our children not to memorize things and know anything, but to be really, really, really good at going and finding answers, even when they flew in the face of what they already believed.
Yeah.
Well, I remember spending a lot of time, quote unquote, like exploring. Like it was just like imagination was really stressed or cultivated.
Yes.
And so that whole idea of being creative
Yeah.
and exploring and basically, literally like playing in dirt or whatever, but, creating kingdoms or whatever you did without any sort of necessarily any material objects to do it with. Like you had to look for it to find, to be able to build it.
Exactly. So do you remember, you may or may not remember this, there was an ad campaign when we went from dial-up internet to when it was first either DSL or from DSL to cable. When cable gave us this amazing amount of bandwidth, like 768K, right? Like, I mean, forget about that today. That's like one chocolate chip cookie today. But the ad was this guy who's, and all of a sudden he looks up and he goes, "I finished the internet." And all of us who were working with dial-up, and it takes you like 5 minutes just to get on AOL after the beat-on, beat-on, beat-on. Those were the days. Our children will never know those noises.
Well, we got into this whole conversation about my nephews in Israel for the second year. And we got into this whole thing about, when I went to Israel, I remember we'd all stand, you had a phone card and you would stand at the phone booth, like online with like 20 other people to be able to like talk for 5 seconds, And basically it was once a month or whatever what the period of time was, say, Mom, I'm alive kind of thing. And don't worry about me. And now, like, my sister-in-law speaks to my nephew every day via
The internet
WhatsApp.
is a wonderful thing, right?
Yeah. WhatsApp. And so it's very different experience. That and airmail letters, versus like email, the old email blue, if you remember blue email letters.
Mm-hmm. Blue email letters.
I was also thinking like years ago, and that, like Ken was saying, like sometimes the numbers are prohibitive of creating circles, but then you would do the smaller circles, they'd break you up into smaller groups, and then you'd sit in a circle. And now I'm thinking today we have Zoom.
That's right. And I thought that same thing. And we are basically in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And if the circle gets too big and it's more than one page, what do? We have breakout rooms to have smaller circles.
Yep. Yep. Same.
It's kind of a remarkable thing. And I actually think that there's at least for me, when I think about it, it's comforting. You know, it really feels, it kind of feels like George Carlin would say, you know, it's like home, you know, home, right? The good home, you know, where everything works and everybody has enough. And there's no fighting and squabbling. You know, that home. And that's kind of what circles are for me. Circles, cycles, circuits, all of that, you know. And so now
Interesting, like, look around your room and see how many things are actually circles. You know, I've got looking at my curtains and they're all just interchangeable circles kind of thing. I've got the mirror on the wall that's a circle, you know, with the Om symbol in the middle, but you know, everything is a circle. You know, plates, cups, everywhere.
what's the symbol for silence?
Gold. No.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, isn't the symbol for Om is kind of like nothingness, I think, or that's one of the translations of it. But I don't know. I don't know what symbol is for silence.
It's interesting.
But is there someone in sign language? I wonder what that would be, what they use.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe one of our listeners will make a comment below and tell us all about that.
That would be cool.
So I guess, you know, the whole point, again, we only yammer at each other every week, you know, to not only take up an hour, but hopefully bring you back to where you've always gone to, so that you can know the first place as if it were the first time, and do it in a way that empowerment shows up. That there's a good feeling about it. There's a feeling of either winning or can do, or, you know, just life's good and everything's going to work out. You know, it's going to be okay. We have in our lives so many different places where life is not good and it's not okay and it's not working for people. However, we can bring minutes into those situations where it is good and it does work and it is okay. Then sometimes hours.
Mhm.
It's kind of remarkable, and I bring that up because we have you know, a couple of family situations right now where we have some older relatives, and they are struggling with end of days dementia, and it's remarkable the things that come out of their mouths. And it's like I was talking to my younger sister whose birthday it is today, as a matter of fact, and she was talking about her beautiful husband. They've been married to each other for 29 years, and he's quite a bit older than she is, and he's struggling at the moment. And there are times when he is not fully in touch with who she is or where they are, and he'll just come out with the strangest things. It's like, you know, his language escapes him at times, and he'll say some words that mean something to him in his reality, and she really has to play Inspector Clouseau to figure out what the dickens he's actually talking about. He said one of the things, they have this deal where she goes to the store and brings him a cookie that's in a plastic wrapper, and she hands it to him, and then he eats the cookie. And well, yesterday he came out with bite, or bite me, you know? And she goes, what are you talking about? And she looked at it, and the plastic wrapper was over the cookie, and he couldn't get at it.
Oh.
So the next thing he says is, "You're not very smart sometimes."
Well, as you were saying that, I'm thinking of, on my Wednesday yoga class, one of my students comes with her granddaughter, who I've been watching like every week for the past like year or so. And so when she first started, she was 3 months old. So now she's like walking and she's starting to talk. Is when kids talk, and that whole like, what are they trying to tell you?
Yes.
And that when you play along with them sometimes, and you're thinking like a kid, and they look at you like, wow, that's like my niece turning to me one day. She had a play kitchen in her bedroom. And I said to her, that's kind of really cool. That means if you get hungry in the middle of the night, you can make something to eat. And she turned to me and said to me, Aunt Jan, it's just a pretend kitchen. Like, what are you, dumb? You know, like, you know, so.
Get that
And
little kid eye roll.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. People like, gosh.
yes, and what the heck? When we bring a fully functioning adult's ability to pretend, I don't know about you, but I had 5 brothers and sisters, and the youngest, the one whose birthday it is today, was 9 years younger than me. And we used to play this game all the time. If we weren't using a stick for a gun or something like that, this game was called Betendin. I may have talked about it before. So, like my younger sister would say, so pretending that we found a lot of money, and pretending we built this big old house, you know? And so then we'd all take turns pretending. And it's just a remarkable thing. We've done that a few times when we've gotten together for holidays and roared. I mean, just laughed like crazy, like really, really crazy people, and just had the best time presencing betending, or betendin. There's no G on betendin. Just to be clear and precise. But the whole notion of doing that as a 50 some odd year old or a 60 some odd year old, be tending in a group like that and just breaking each other up, having the best time ever.
Circling
I
back.
think the world needs more of that, Jan, and thank you for reminding me.
No, I was thinking of what Ken said about, giving adults permission to be kids, like
Mhm.
in that experience. We have this idea that once we grow up, we can't act like that anymore.
Until you do.
Until you do, or till you don't care, what people think or whatever. And you're kind of like, I'm just going to do it anyway.
Yes.
I always had that theory too. In fact, like like a decade or so ago, I had a little company called Kid and You, and it was field trips for grown-ups. I mean, it didn't last very long, but the idea was there. I still wanted to see grown-ups having fun again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of my all-time favorite lines in a song. I don't know if Neil Young ever wrote about a circle. He probably did, being from Canada and all in Ontario. There's a lot of circles up there. But my favorite Neil Young line is, doesn't mean that much to me to mean that much to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's kind of how he's always lived his life, right? He would be that kid on the bus that was flashing the moon out the back.
Oh,
And people would love him for it.
Oh man.
Oh, yeah. In his reprise. I don't know if you're big Neil Young fans or not, but Harvest Moon is a really, really great retrospective in several areas. And I don't know, it's 24 and so much more, Do you know the story about that? When he bought the ranch, and there was a caretaker that was there that was in his 50s. But 50 back in 1967 or 68 was fairly old, you know. And so he had a wrinkled face and all the rest of it. And Neil got a lot of time to just have conversations with him and, you know, really get into. I'm a lot like you were, you know. Why are you out here taking care of this ranch? Because, you know, at the end of the day, we both think a lot alike, you know, and maybe I can live my life and live alone in a paradise that makes me think of two. So it all comes back around, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I'm saying today. And again, it's just a conversation, right? We're just people talking, right?
Yep.
Do you ever find yourself, and I'm talking from my own personal experience now. I'll be in the middle of doing something and either grinding away at it, really fully concentrating, or something. And then all of a sudden I think of a conversation that we had, something that Jan said, or something that Lisa said, or something that Ken said, and I look up and I just laugh. And for a minute or two, I'm transported right back to this place where we're in four corners, and we have different windows every single time. But at the end of our time together, I want to say I always feel 100% better than when we started. I always start off pretty darn good.
Appreciate it.
Any parting thoughts?
Go be in circle somewhere.
Except don't get caught in the mental circle, as I call it, the mental cul-de-sac
No.
or the emotional sack, where it just, you know, you're repeating the same story in your head all the time.
I like that.
Transform that circle into a spiral.
That's right.
That works really well when you paint yourself into a corner. So anyhow, just to remind you and to reinforce and to consolidate, we are lighting the candle, a world that works, and it's been our pleasure to have a conversation on your behalf, and hopefully something we've said today will resonate with you, that maybe during the course of the week you'll just look up and smile and go, those rascals. Until next time, thanks for listening, and thanks for keeping us at this. We love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.